Right, so first slide, building a world in Bitcoin. Sovryn's mission is to build a world on Bitcoin, around Bitcoin, which looks a lot more like Bitcoin, right? Building the tools for institutions, economic transactions, and personal sovereignty that is permissionless, global, and censorship resistant. And the first step, as we've pointed out in a number of articles as well as the most recent blog post, the first step to this is building an economy on Bitcoin. The economy is always the engine of innovation and the engine of freedom. So some of you may have seen the article I published in Bitcoin Magazine recently about lessons that the world had learned about Bitcoin in 2021. So let's start there. And this is the second slide. There are a few, I'll focus on just a few of the lessons. Right. One of the big lessons that we learned over the course of 2021 is that there is going to be, for the foreseeable future, a proliferation of many, many, many chains, especially smart contract platforms. We are clearly in a multi-chain ecosystem. But the amazing thing about this is that it has done nothing so much as reinforce Bitcoin's unique position as the most trusted crypto asset. Even though we've seen so many new projects come out, they've only enhanced the feeling that Bitcoin is entirely unique in the crypto space. And why is that important? Because of the second thing. At the beginning of the year, at the beginning of 2021, the consensus was that Ethereum had created insurmountable network effects and a moat because it had the developers and it had money Legos and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And yet what we've seen is exactly the opposite. We've seen that Ethereum, and as a result, all smart contract platforms have weak moats. Every single dApp today is multi-chain. The users can use any wallet to use any chain. BSC, Solana, Polygon, and I think other chains as well have already surpassed Ethereum in terms of number of daily transactions, number of active addresses, and even the amount of value being transacted on a daily basis. The second thing is that we ended the year 2020 and started the year 2021 with really important innovations in the DeFi space. A number of key primitives, trading, lending, and derivatives had been invented in a decentralized way and were proving true product market fit in the Ethereum and later in other ecosystems. This year, we've continued to see a huge proliferation of DeFi projects. And now people talk about DeFi 2.0 and DeFi 3.0, but we haven't seen the same kind of fundamental innovation. The new projects are focused on supporting and really driving all of their use through token subsidies and increased risk. This is not true for all of the projects, but it's true for 95% of the projects that have come out of the course of the last year. And I would say that from the perspective of DeFi innovation, it has been a disappointing year. But it's a very important lesson because what it basically teaches us is that increased financial engineering and gamification, these sophisticated or not so sophisticated financial games do not represent fundamental innovations. They maybe represent more of a casino. And the real value is in continuing to enhance and improve a relatively limited set of core financial primitives. Right? Trading, lending, derivatives, and a few other things represent the true value that finance brings. So to summarize, Bitcoin is more than a store of value. The desire to use BTC as a monetary asset has been increasing over the course of the last year. We've seen this with El Salvador. We've seen it with Lightning Network adoption. We've seen it in Nigeria and other places. And the world has an increasing need for sound finance as well as sound economics. And all of this needs to be built on sound money. And Sovryn answers this specific call. So two lessons of many lessons specific to Sovryn that we've learned. One is that as we grow larger, we need more polished releases because as we attract a more and more mainstream audience, we attract an audience that is less able or less willing to deal with very, very raw releases. Over the course of our year zero, like an infant, we were, spitting out whatever we could as quickly as we could. We were learning and growing very, very fast. We need to continue to develop and innovate quickly, but we now need to do so in a more polished way. And second, as we grow larger and for the same reason, simple communication becomes more important. People are less able or willing to go down the rabbit hole. And also, as our system grows in complexity, the advantage and power of simple communication becomes even more important. And so to maintain this speed, we need to have simplicity, and that means we need to have focus. Steve Jobs, I think, made a very, very important point around focus. He said that to be great, you need to have focus. You need to focus on the few things that are going to really matter. And in order to focus, you have to say no. Or as he defined it, focus is basically what you say no to. And so we need to be very, very clear, not only on what we want to do, but more importantly, on what we don't intend on doing. And then the second thing is that our speed of development now needs to be combined with more polished releases. And we're going to be doing that by increasingly trying to bundle together the releases that we put together. And by bundling them, we don't just mean about the technological features, but bundling them also with UI and with the time for the adoption team to provide the right tutorials, explanations, and build up the audience interest in the upcoming releases rather than just releasing them straight away. A second big question, and this is slide 4, that I think we've seen debated across the team, across the community over the course of the last year, is a second framework, right? So what I'm trying to do in this presentation is present a number of the thinking frameworks, right? The mental frameworks we should be using when we're thinking about Sovryn. And one of the mental frameworks has been a question: should we be attracting Bitcoiners to DeFi, right? Trying to get Bitcoiners to use Sovryn as their first DeFi experience, or should we be bringing people from Ethereum and Polygon and etc., altcoiners to Bitcoin? Now, I'm going to argue that this is the wrong framework. I don't think these are different people. I don't think thinking about them as Bitcoiners versus everyone else is the right way for us to think about it. And beyond that, it's the wrong framework because we need to be doing both. But I'll try and answer this question both with a clear answer and with a different mental framework in a moment. And to do that, I'm going to move to slide 5. So I'd like to introduce an idea which we've been talking about a lot in the core team, which is that Bitcoin is Slo-fi. What we mean by Slo-fi is slow in the best possible sense. It's patient finance. It's patient economics, right? That's how true wealth is usually grown. It's by conviction and patience. In the crypto world, Bitcoin is the low-risk store of value. Now, this is a bit of a crazy thing to say about Bitcoin because it's so volatile, but in the crypto world, it certainly is like the risk-free asset. It is the rock. And as a result, the majority of Bitcoin is held in long-term supply. What that means is that people are not transacting it. They're hodling it for long periods of time. We've seen at the end of last year, twice, the amount of Bitcoin outstanding held in wallets which never transacted went up as high as 76%. And today, it's 81%. This tells us something very, very clear about the mental model that people are using when they're using Bitcoin. It's long-term thinking. The second thing, and this explains why I think thinking about it as altcoiners versus Bitcoiners is the wrong mental framework, is because Alice, or any one of us, can both be a degen and a Bitcoin holder. But what we're doing, the mental framework that we're using when we are holding Bitcoin is one of long-term sustainable growth. And when we're a degen, what we're trying to do is get rich quick. And so moving on to slide 6, here's a distinction that I think can be useful to us as a mental framework. DeFi versus Slo-fi. Now, in this particular case, I'm going to make a bit of a caricature of DeFi in order to illustrate the point, but I'll be talking about DeFi as get-rich-quick finance. You know, you're 20 years old, you've got $1,000, you really want to make money, you're going to make more money in the future, so you're willing to take your $1,000 and take a high-risk bet in the hopes that you win the lottery, right? That's a lot of what's going on in DeFi today. Slo-fi, on the other hand, the time preference of Slo-fi is patiently managing your wealth. The first thing you want to do is preserve your wealth. And then you want to, and as a secondary priority, grow it. The markets here are very, very different. DeFi is a fast and niche market, right? It's a market where it's much younger. For example, we've noticed that the people who are using Sovryn have a much older average age than a lot of the people using other DeFi products. And it's the sort of more gambling, more I want to build up my first wealth approach. Or I'm a large institutional and I'm trying to do sophisticated financial gaming. Whereas Slo-fi is a large market. In fact, it's almost the entire financial market. Families, young professionals, family offices, institutional wealth, the vast majority of that is primarily about wealth preservation and then consistent growth. So it is the market, but it is more conservative. More conservative in two ways. First of all, it is more conservative about the kind of things that and risks that it's willing to take. It's also more conservative in terms of the types of new things or how quickly it will adopt new things. So DeFi, as a result, has relatively low sustainability. It is highly subsidized by projects vomiting out large numbers of tokens. It's a high risk with very, very opaque risk, whereas Slo-fi is people who are coming in with a long-term approach and looking to grow over the long term. Once you capture someone in a Slo-fi mental state, you've captured them for a very long time. Now, this has a very important implication for a number of reasons, and we won't go into all of the reasons now because we're trying to do this quickly, but we can expect to see DeFi have much faster growth rates. Whereas projects that focus on Slo-fi, right, managing wealth, are going to grow more slowly, but more consistently. And so a question that we need to ask ourselves as a community and a decision that we need to make is, what do we want to focus on? And we argue that we should be focusing on slow and consistent Slo-fi and be willing to pay the price. And we need to be very, very clear that this is the price that we're paying of slower, less apparent growth, certainly in the early stages. And the reasons that we should do this, we'll cover in a moment. But one of the biggest reasons is DeFi, across all of the different protocols and all of the different chains, is a saturated market, right? Where a lot of the activity is stealing users from one project to another. Whereas Slo-fi, the ability to, in a permissionless way, in a borderless way, manage, preserve, and grow my wealth is effectively an unanswered market. It's massive and no one's really providing for it. So coming back to the question of who our target audience is, Sovryn, building an economy around Bitcoin in the first stage means helping people put their Bitcoin to work in the way that Bitcoin works, permissionlessly, censorship resistant. This means that Sovryn has the ability to have a unique position in a totally unaddressed market, a sustainable market consistent with Sovryn's principles, and here's the key thing, remember we spoke about the lack of moat or network effects in smart contract platforms. Well, when it comes to Slo-fi, time in market is a moat. And this is one of the reasons that we place so much emphasis on security, audits, bug reports, and never pushing out anything unless we are very, very confident about it. Because the longer we are in market, proving that our system works, the more of a moat we build around Sovryn, the more it becomes difficult to compete with us because it's difficult to build up the brand, the trust, and the track record that Sovryn has in the same way that Bitcoin has a track record. So when we think about that, we should be thinking about the fact that this is like an investment that we're making. One of the cool things about it is really there's no project that is doing what Sovryn is doing right now. And so we are continuing to build this moat with every day that passes. So what are the implications in terms of focus? Slide 8. So in orange are the things that we believe that core team should focus on. from a product perspective, it is those things which are going to allow people to use their Bitcoin and other assets, but starting with Bitcoin, in ways where there are transparent risks, easy to understand, and very, very clear use cases, right? Bitcoin-backed stablecoins, the ability to transact in Bitcoin and to get liquidity on my Bitcoin without having to sell. Zero interest loans, which make this even more attractive and is something that isn't offered anywhere, not in DeFi, not in CeFi, nowhere is anyone able to offer a way for me to hold onto my Bitcoin and yet get to borrow against it at zero interest rates into perpetuity. And perpetual markets or perp swaps, the ability to hedge and leverage against my Bitcoin, right? Those are core primitives that we've known from day one that we want, and now we're on the cusp of having it. And then on the infrastructure side, Lightning integration as well as deeper integration with the rest of the Bitcoin ecosystem, and reaching scale so that Sovryn is going to be as easy, as seamless, as frictionless, or even better to use, more delightful to use than any centralized alternative. This leaves a large number of things which we still think are important. Launchpads, NFTs, other DeFi dApps with different kinds of strategies and different types of risk assessments, wallets integrating, DAO tooling, bridges, etc. These things still need to be done. We can do them by encouraging an ecosystem to be built around Sovryn. But this is a secondary priority, and it is part of the answer to what we are saying no to. What we're effectively saying is that the core team, at least, should say no to anything that isn't in orange. And to make that point, slide 9 basically tried to differentiate. We have the core team working on the products, Bitcoin-backed stablecoins, perpetual markets, etc., and the infrastructure, scaling, Lightning, and the ecosystem, which is going to be building around that, effectively growing the effective power of the ecosystem and doing things that the core team would never be able to do with focus, and allowing us to grow that. So that's the going to be the immediate and ongoing value of encouraging the ecosystem. What this means from a roadmap perspective, well, on the product side, over the first half, H1 of this year, we expect to have the perpetual swaps, Nuestro, which is the Bitcoin-backed stablecoin, Zero, which is the perpetual zero interest rate loans against Bitcoin. On the infrastructure side, hardcore work, difficult work around Lightning, improving the Lightning network by using smart contracts, improving the smart contracts by integrating them with Lightning, node efficiency, scalability, roll-ups with zero-knowledge proofs, right? And then what that allows us to do in the second half of this year, right, is on the product side, start building extremely easy to use, easy to understand interfaces which allow you to combine the benefits of these different primitives, the trading, the lending, the perpetual swaps, and allow people to have sort of pre-made strategies that they can just fire and forget, right? Something that they don't need to babysit. And on the infrastructure side, deploying, right, the hard work, putting the hard work that we've built in terms of fundamental infrastructure development, deploying it to reach the point that Sovryn is able to provide the speed and scalability and experience, the user experience of effectively centralized systems or better. And all this effectively means that towards the end of the year, we're coming together, building out a system which is extremely accessible to everyone, right? To people who have never used a DeFi product before, people who have Bitcoin and have never moved it out of their wallets, people who've maybe never used Bitcoin before, like in El Salvador, making a system which is delightful and easy to use because we built something great because we had the focus to do that. I think this is how, over the course of the coming year, we can focus on building out this first key piece, which is a truly functional, truly delightful, easy to understand economic system built on the principles and security of Bitcoin, right? Secured by Bitcoin, and which provides for people to start having the sovereignty to manage their financial lives without intermediaries in a way that was never before possible. So I think that's going to allow more people to stay sovereign and allow us to build an engine which is going to grow and expand the scope of what Sovryn is able to do in terms of building a world around Bitcoin. So with that, I think those are some of the mental frameworks that we are thinking about. And now I'd like to open this up to all of you so we can have a conversation, and we'll have a number of conversations. So even if you don't have opportunity to speak today, we are going to have a number of town halls on an ongoing basis, and especially over the coming weeks. Judas, I'm handing us over to you to MC.
So, as Jacob said, now is not your time to ask your questions. So you can head back from YouTube to our Discord server and start shooting them. You can also send questions on YouTube if you'd like, and we'll read them out for you. But it's best to be here and ask them for yourself. Okay, who wants to go first?
Maybe.
Yeah, go ahead.
Let me just maybe start the discussion on this topic of Slo-fi, given it was just saw the presentation on it. I just have some worries about it. So so one thing about the Slo-fi is that
Sorry, can I just ask that you introduce yourself so we know who's talking?
Oh, apologies. Sorry, this is Martin Adrian.
Ah, thanks, Martin. I thought it was you, but I wasn't sure.
Yeah. So I think we all agree that at the moment the soft token is a high risk sort of thing, and there's a danger if Sovryn takes this Slo-fi route that it seems sort of high risk, low reward, or high risk, slow reward. But in any case, not something that is attractive enough for investors, and it often is people investing that sort of first find their way to a project, that it's attractive enough, and that it sort of is able to bootstrap. So that's first point. Second point would be sort of just to ask this sort of, just to question this assumption, just ask about this assumption that why slow growth would be more consistent or better growth. That's a kind of assumption that doesn't seem automatically sort of convincing to me. And the third point would be tokenomics. So I think we're kind of a bit sort of chained by the tokenomics that it just happened, that sort of Sovryn just happens to have. The Slo-fi, a Slo-fi route would probably also require a sort of tokenomics that fits a Slo-fi route, and by that I mean just simply a less steep release schedule. So at the moment there's quite a steep release schedule, and that's people have been complaining about that. I think that's totally fine as long as there is sort of enough additions of features, enough sort of ways in which to use Sov, etc., etc. And if there's enough value capture, that's totally fine. But the steepness of the release schedule kind of dictates how fast the addition of features should go to offset the release schedule. And the Slo-fi route, to me, it's a very interesting thought, but it just at the moment it seems to jar with the tokenomics that we have. So that will be another worry. And I completely agree, by the way, that DeFi is a very saturated market. I think that's absolutely true, and I think it's really important to sort of think about that. But I'm super excited about Sovryn, the idea, and I think it's unique enough to outperform the others in this saturated market. But that's maybe optimistic. I just sort of very optimistic hope. But yeah, so just some points to start the discussion.
Thank you very much, Martin. I'll provide my views, and then maybe some other people would be interested in providing their views. So I think you gave a very good and coherent perspective, and it's certainly part of the dilemma that we were discussing. So with regards to the first point, around the value of the SOV token. So the SOV token is high risk. Yes, it is, and indeed it should be, because we're trying to do something ambitious, which always entails high risk. And so the question is it attractive enough? And so I think the way we should be thinking about that is attractive in what way, or attractive under what mental model, right? If the comparison is to projects which, people hope will 100x over the next month, right? Or as I think I published today something where I say, if it's people who are looking for a pop, right? I don't think that's even the kind of holder or person that we want attracted to SOE. Because the thing about the pop is that it's very gratifying when it happens, but the pop also assumes the popping, right? It's things go up and then things go down. The whole thing is designed around a very, very short time frame, high time preference. So I think what we should be encouraging for our community and in calculating in ourselves is this idea that SOV as well is building fundamental value, and will do so in bull markets and in bear markets over the course of many years to create something truly unique, truly delightful, and which answers a very, very important need. Then the question that you asked was, how does this impact the release schedule? I don't think we will be releasing fewer things. I think we will just be trying to release them when they are more polished, rather than giving people the experience of truly using an alpha product, which I think was appropriate. And so when we release, we want to release with a higher level of polish. And I think the pieces that are coming out, right, are the maturation, right, the realization of the roadmap that we put out in the black paper, right, of having these core components: trading, lending, futures, and Bitcoin-backed stablecoins. And what you can do with those core primitives, that becomes the really interesting thing, right, when you can start combining those things. I also don't think that the growth is going to be, right, we're not suggesting we should be trying to achieve slow growth. We'll be looking to grow quickly, but we want to grow quickly on the basis of the principle that what we're building is something which answers the need of people who are coming with a Bitcoin mindset. In other words, they're coming with a desire to be able to feel confident to use a system, hold a system, even passively, over long periods of time. And finally, with regards to the release schedule of the token, I think the release schedule of the token is, was designed to start slowing down now, basically, after year zero, and it is. And in addition to that, because the adoption pool is effectively channeled through the treasury, there is a good deal of control over what the short-term or practical release schedule is. Right, so tokens are released on a preordained schedule to the treasury, to the exchequer, but how those are used and how they're distributed, we have a greater deal of control over, and I think that that was a good decision because it allows us to exactly, try and match our strategy with the token release schedule. Are there other people who would like to comment, follow up on what Martin was discussing or respond to Martin?
Hey, this is David. I'd like to add on to that. First off, I think the presentation is great, and I'm in full support of refining the focus onto those core primitives of perp swaps, zero, lightning, and 0% interest Bitcoin-backed loans. I do have similar concerns about the branding of Slo-fi. I think for the purposes of communicating the message and the direction to the community, it's totally fine. But to the outsider's perspective, that word of slow, it kind of has a negative connotation to it. It's kind of boring. It's not very sexy. And I understand that we don't necessarily want to lean into this kind of like egregious marketing messaging and setting the wrong expectations. But just from talking in the community, but with a bunch of people, I think there's kind of like a to the word like Slo-fi. So that's just my personal opinion on that.
I think it's a point well made, and I think it would be great to entertain conversations around how this is indeed an internal conversation with the community. I think it's a very stark message with Slo-fi, but in terms of how we want to brand it externally and to the world, I think we can think about that together. I think let's create a thread where we can brainstorm this together. But let's maybe not use the precious time we have here together on that.
Yeah. All right. So if anyone has any other subjects,
Iago,
just introduce yourself.
Hello.
Yeah, just introduce yourself. That's what I said, and go ahead.
Iago, this is Matt here. Thank you for your presentation. Just for the point, I agree with the most point Martin made. I had also similar points, and I want to just comment on your remark about for myself. I invested in Zov as an investor, and I invested in some other things as well in crypto and outside crypto. I'm not like chasing candles or a moon boy or something like that. But of course, no one wants to invest in something what's depreciating all the time. Even for myself now, I have a question. Okay, do I want to invest more in Sov as a token or not? And now for me, it's not very clear as an investor. Okay, is it? I think it has a good use case in the long term, but because of the tokenomics and everything, maybe it's better to wait and step in at a lower level. And I think every investor will look at it like this, and it's not saying that as soon as I have a green candle, I will sell. No, I'm just not interested in buying and then depreciating because of tokenomics. And I agree also with the Slo-fi thing. I think it's not the best branding. I think most Bitcoiners would like more focus on secure. That's a good branding from my perspective. Having said that, I thought also the discussion would be about the bonding curve, or is it coming later about the OG? I thought the town was also regarding the bonding curve to release it or not.
Yes, definitely. I mean, if that's a big part about it. I think people want to discuss. So let's open that discussion.
Yeah, and I have just a few. So I want to hear the discussion. So I want to see other people feel that. Just a few questions from marketing point. I saw some things releasing in El Salvador, big Bitcoin-backed stablecoins. Is it still Sovryn still? And I didn't hear anything from the soft side. Is there still working on that with the soft and the cooperation with the bank in El Salvador, or is that gone now?
So there is a number of initiatives in El Salvador. And one of them is to bring Bitcoin-backed stablecoins to El Salvador and to allow people to start using them at retail locations. The work that was being done with Banco Hipotecario has been paused. It was only one piece, and I don't think necessarily the most important piece. And the reason that the work specifically with Banco Hipotecario has been paused is because it became apparent that they were doing they were doing it for the purposes of PR rather than something fundamental, and that is a waste of our focus and resources in terms of we want to be focused on the real things on the ground and not on trying to give Banco Hipotecario a way to say that they're innovative. Okay.
Right. And also the one more question is my last one. Instead of new exchange listing, are the teams still working on that, or is it like is it on pause for the moment?
Is Armando on the call?
Yep, I'm on the call. The team's constantly working on exchange listings. A lot of that is obviously not in our hands and very much dependent on the exchanges themselves. But yes, to answer your question, that's there are people dedicated on the team specifically to that.
Okay, great, thanks.
Was there something that you wanted to say with regards to the bonded tokens, or are you just hoping other people will open up the conversation?
Yeah, well, of course, I can start the discussion. I also said something about it in the forum. I think obviously I don't agree with letting go of the. I want to just state I'm not a technical guy, so I don't know all the details how that works, a bonding curve. I just like the fact that it's connected to SOF and the SOF token. So as a SOF investor, I like that, of course. So I voted yes on the SIP. That I had my doubts. I had my doubts in the first, like I think when I love of Sovryn. So why should we release OG and then separate protocol? And if there is a need of funds, maybe there's other way to fundraise than just to release a new token. I understand that's the quickest and easy way to get some funds and to really kickstart this project. But I'm also afraid to have a lot of tokens and maybe a lot of Bitcoiners will not like it. And now, so we said yes to that, and as a community with the bonding curve. Now with the new SIP proposal, they basically say let's go with the bonding curve, and they want to discuss then how high should be the staking rewards. But I'm more of the position from, okay, if you stop the bonding curve, then let's stop it as a sub-protocol, keep it on the SOF. Then basically we have 100% staking rewards. Maybe then the growth is slower, but in the long term, as a SOF taker and holder, you have, I think, greater benefit from it. That is my view on it.
I don't want to monopolize the conversation, so I think those are well-articulated points. Are there other people who would like to comment on this, and then maybe I'll give some thoughts of my own after a few comments?
I will maybe say something, Julius here. So when pretty much at the beginning when I joined Sovryn about 4 months ago, maybe a week or two after we started talking about Zero, and to me it was very, very strange. Like, why would Zero be a separate product? I mean, we have loans on Sovryn, and we have trading, we have all kinds of products, but we already have loans. So why, to me, it would have been trivial to just combine zero interest loans in the system that we had. So to me, actually, it would make much more sense to keep Zero and everything inside Sovryn and give users more options. I don't really, and I support keeping this in-house, and I'm happy that we open this again for discussion. And I'd also love to hear what people think about it. Is Zero, in your opinion, a separate product from Sovryn?
I can go ahead. All right. This is Lord Elvick. Just a couple things. I'm not sure in the chat. I would like to circle back on fast BTC, but bidirectional. But speaking specific to Zero, I thought that the thing that jumped out at me, we had two elements. One was that we're building an ecosystem, and therefore you have a limited number of development resources at any one time that you can devote to building out functionality across an ecosystem. So the ability to have multiple groups or parties contribute. You look at really where Ethereum's been successful, and these other chains that have come up after that, has been able to provide a lot of functionality in sort of the keeping of the principles of that community quickly. And there's just so much the core developers can do. That was one point. But then the other one that I was very, very bullish on was the integration that bonded curves kind of provided to that ecosystem. So you didn't just spin up a bunch of different tokens and have the shitcoin show. So I thought those two together were actually very elegant, and that was my impression. I'm not sure the other gentleman who's speaking wants to comment, but those are my responses.
Yeah.
Yeah.
David?
Yeah, thanks, Judas. So I've gone back and forth on the Sub-DAO idea a lot on the forum post. And generally speaking, I really like the idea, and I see a ton of value in it. However, I do worry that we're applying the logic of our Sub-DAOs good and valuable as this kind of blanket statement instead of looking at each individual Sub-DAO application itself. And so my concern is that we just don't know what any of this stuff is yet. It's too soon to know, does this need sub-governance? Does this generate revenue? Is this going to be a viable product? And I think we're jumping ahead and trying to create these Sub-DAOs without actually knowing what they are yet. And so I would almost prefer something where we try to keep it in-house as much as possible in the early phases while it incubates. And then once we see and we say, oh, wow, this is actually generating revenue. Oh, wow, this is actually taking up a lot of governance that needs its own separate governance model. Or, hey, this is actually a legitimate product. Or maybe, hey, this thing is going in the trash can. Like we just need to know what it is before we then split it out as a Sub-DAO. And so
Exactly.
I feel like the only compelling case for the Sub-DAOs is on the funding mechanism side. And I'm sympathetic to that point that we can release these Sub-DAOs and it allows other people to kind of get funding. But I'm not convinced that trade-off outweighs all these other unknowns of what I just mentioned. So I'll pause there. I can definitely talk about it more, but that's my general perspective right now.
So I don't want to try and give a definitive answer here, right? I have my own opinions, but primarily what I want to try and do is provide a window into what I'm seeing in terms of working with the core team. And what I'm seeing is the following. I think one is the sense that it's extremely important for us to be willing to take bets, to experiment on unusual, even potentially disruptive things which might require a lot of investment, which might not work out in the short term, but could potentially have very big long-term advantages. And I think that some Sub-DAOs, and in particular the way that they were conceptualized with SOV bonded tokens, was exactly the kind of experiment, exactly the kind of big bet that we should be always excited to try. So we did. And I think what we then did, right, there's this great Yogi Berra line, which is one of my favorite quotes. It's that in theory, there's no difference between theory and practice, but in practice, there is, right? So the theory around SOV bonded tokens and Sub-DAOs was great. And I think still actually, like David says, is great. But then we tried it. And what we saw in practice was with Mint, there was a lot of confusion. And it was difficult for users to understand exactly what this meant, how this was different from regular tokens, as well as it didn't provide the level of polish, right? We don't yet have the level of polish around releasing these types of Sub-DAO tokens that we want to have going forward with all of the things that we're releasing. And so the core team took a step back and said, okay, is this in line with what we're trying to do right now? Like, does it make sense to release more of them? And so my thought, and the thought of a lot of other people, was I think probably it makes sense right now to say, all right, we tried this experiment. There was a lot of things that we learned from it. Great. Maybe trying it again with improvements on the basis of those lessons makes sense, but that is not something we can do in the very immediate sense. And so basically we've got 3 tokens that were approved in SIPs for this type of launch, right? We have Mint, which has been launched, and that can remain a separate token with separate governance. or could potentially be reabsorbed, and that's a conversation we should have. There's zero, which I think is becoming more and more apparent as a core part of what we want to be developing as a community, and we probably want that under core team. And so that's an additional reason that we're starting internally, I think, with the core team. And, the community will decide in the SIP, but we're starting to think that maybe with that we should at least postpone the creation of a separate token. And then there's OG, right? Origins. Now, Origins is a special, and I think is the most complicated case, right? And there's a lot of nuance to the conversation around what we do there. And what makes it difficult is that there's a really great team behind Origins, and Origins can do great things for the ecosystem, can be a really key piece of building out the ecosystem. And this core team have built technology which has taken Origins and provided features that the core, the Origins team have built out things that the core team would never have had time to build out, and have also gone and raised a good amount of money, which would allow them to continue independently working, which would help decentralize the project and allow core team to be more focused. But doing an SOV bonded token launch right now would probably be a mistake, right? It's not the right market. It's not that we don't have the right polish and preparation, and it's still too confusing. And so the question is, do we say we're not going to be spinning off Origins, in which case core team would need to look after it? And I can say with a high degree of certainty that would mean that Origins would not continue to progress at the rate it should, not in terms of technology and not in terms of sort of business development and bringing in new projects. Or do we spin it off in a different way? And so the Origins team have put a forum post out around spinning it off in a different way, and I'm not sure that that's the right way. But I do think there is merit to the idea that with this particular thing, maybe we don't even do a sale. We just spin it off, right? Without an additional sale. But I think that there's a lot of value in having Origins continue as an independent team, because I think it's going to be very, very hard for us to retain that talent. Right? Having had conversations with them, if they do not feel like they can be sovereign, that's what, people who are really able to take initiative and hustle, they're exactly the kind of people who want to have the benefits and disadvantages of being responsible for the project and the fate of their project. So that's just a view, right, which I think is important as context for why that post was posted and how we should be thinking about this. I think we should, be proud of ourselves for taking this.
Can I jump in, Jaco, since it's a town hall?
Sure, please.
Look, from my experience in business life, I think what you just said is I totally don't agree with it, in the sense of no team, no developer, no one should be bigger or higher than the actually the project itself. So I think I would if it approached from a business way, if I was director of Sof, I would say I would say, okay, Sovryn is strong, Sovryn is independent. If someone is threatening to leave the project or don't want to work on the project, and then we have to just do whatever they want because to keep them, I would, from a business-wise perspective, I would let them go, and then maybe it takes a little bit longer and develop yourself. And I think that this is a sign of like a strong Slo-fi kind of in sense of like if one person or the team of persons, they can decide the course of the whole the platform. I think this is a wrong view, to be honest. It's almost, I don't know. It doesn't make sense in my opinion.
So because you're responding to me, I'll quickly respond to that. So just to be clear, the majority of the team that is currently working on Origins were not sort of core developers or people who had been compensated by Sovryn and now asked to be spun out, but rather people who were attracted to the Origins project because they saw an opportunity to take something and build it further. And this is actually similar to what we're seeing with Blindex, right? So Blindex was an idea which was started by someone who wasn't part of core but was closely aligned and was an SOV investor. And now another team have sort of been attracted to it and want to take the idea and run. So, you know, we can definitely make the decision that we're fine with going slower, that it's not super necessary to launch this now. But I don't think that thinking about it in terms of these people are, you know, think of themselves as better, too good to work on Sovryn is the right. I think it's quite the opposite. These are people who are excited to work on Sovryn. But what working at Sovryn means is not what it means to be working at Apple, right? It means being part of an ecosystem which goes beyond just core. And that's actually something I think we want to encourage.
I would like very much that the team of OG have the same incentive as a soft holder and staker. I would like that they have the same that they get paid or whatever in soft, so they have the same mindset as all the other sovereigns had, and they want to do everything to not contribute to the OG token, but contribute to the soft protocol and token. And also, Jaco, can you explain in like easy terms, because I don't understand all the technical. How could it be that we launched I think Babyface, Mint, Sovryn launched its own token? Why is it technical now necessary to have a lot of improvement and stuff to release other tokens? I mean, Origin is releasing tokens already. Why can't they not just continue doing that?
Sure, I could answer that, but maybe instead of that, is there someone from the Origins team on this call who would like to comment?
Sure. Hey guys, my name is Shovyn John. I am a contributor of Origins, and to start with, I want to mention that the SIP, the new update SIP which we did, is actually a draft. It's not a done deal or anything like that. So I just want to make sure that mainly we put it out on the forum because we needed to get a feedback from you guys. It's because we thought that the bonding curve was not a good play for Origins to move forward. And I'm just saying that was our opinion about that kind of topic. And we wanted your opinion and the feedback which we can get from the community so that we can improve on this. That's how we did even our first SIP. We presented an idea before the community. We went back and forth on that and we made some improvements on that. And then we moved forward with it. And at that time, I believe that bonding curve was actually an innovative idea to move forward. But after the mint, as Iago said, due to the confusion and all those things, we didn't thought that Origins would be better with the bonding curve mechanism, and we could use that for our project. And that's why we thought that we should create something a bit different from the bonding curve, but at the same time be beneficial for the Sovryn community. But at the same time, as based on the feedback we have been receiving from the last few days, we have been looking at it and are considering it as a constructive criticism itself. We are not looking like, as some of you might thought, that we are better or something like that, but we are not. We are actually interested to keep working on Sovryn in one way or the other. And that's why we move forward with this kind of initiative from our end. In terms of the token sales, the Babelfish and the Mint, I wanted to tell you regarding this, like I have been working with Sovryn since last December. And during my time on Sovryn, there was a point of time where this was introduced, like we want to do a Babelfish sale and we should move forward and just use our early Origins contract, which was actually used at the time of Sovryn sale, the first initial Sovryn sale, and just change our some of the things. Like at that time, the Sovryn sale happened with the NFT rather than doing any SOV stakers verification or any address-based verification. It was done through an NFT sale. So I was asked to work on that and to change just the verification method from NFT to an address-based mechanism for the Babelfish sale. And I told the core team that why don't we do something more than that? Why don't we use this as an opportunity to make the Launchpad a plug-and-play kind of system, and to make sure that this kind of system can be used in the coming launches, all which we can do. And if you look at the current smart contract system which I have built, you will see that there are multiple mechanisms which we can just use as just adding just a number. Like if we want to do it an address-based verification, we can do it like that. If we want to do it as a sovereign stakers-based verification, we can do it like that. And each kind of verification or each kind of deposit types or each kind of any other plug-and-play system, these kind of things take time to develop. And it's not just development, it takes time to test it out, not just from a manual standpoint, but from a front-end integration standpoint. Then we have to do an external audit, we have to do an internal audit. These things take time, these things take resources. And as an overall thing, like Yago said, the core team has much more important and much more major protocols like lending, borrowing, and all those things to handle. And this might take much more time to get these things developed in the Launchpad. So I just want to give you a backstory where we were coming from and how we were developing this. And now in terms of the new SIP, what I want to discuss, actually get some feedback from you guys is that, see, we understood that you wanted to have the SOV to get Sovryn token to get a much more better reward ratio, I'll say, in terms of what we can make through Origins. And what I would like to suggest is that, setting aside the current SIP, about the fixed supply, what do you think about a grant-based mechanism? Like David said, and with a good video as well, like we don't know what this is right now, what it could become in the future. So why don't we do it like this? We start with a grant-based system, which obviously the sovereign treasury has to support. Right now, the Origins team has been working on with some great investors, and we have raised some amount of money. I know that Sovryn have been working with some of their own investors to start with a Series A round or some other investment round. We can transfer that amount to that if the investors also agree. Else we can do some kind of refund to the investors, and then start with a grant-based mechanism for the Origins team. What do you think about these things? Like, do you think that is a viable option? And then all the revenue which comes, most of it can go to the Sovryn community itself, either through a staking reward program or some other reward or incentive mechanism. And a small part of it goes to the Origins team so that they can self-sustain, at the same time get some grants from the Sovryn team. What do you think about that?
Shevin, first off, really appreciate everything that you do, and your kind of willingness to kind of like hear out the community. Can you clarify what you're saying? Like, are you saying like a grant, and almost where like from the sovereign treasury, we essentially buy out or almost like refinance your prior investment commitments, and in return, you say you're not going to launch a token, but that allows you to get the funding, that allows you to kind of potentially finance some of the team, and then we figure out something that in the future? Is my recap kind of correct there?
Yeah, yes. So in a way, like we test it out, like we get to know, as you said, how or what this is going to be. And in some time, if the community decides that this is actually going beyond and above the limits and can do much better in terms of having their own token, at that time, if let's say that the UX and UI and the capital efficiency and all those things are being handled, or in some way we can figure out a solution for that at that time, we can go forward and create our own token in at that time. But right now, why don't we start with this mechanism, build out the system in a way, and make sure that this sees the light of the day?
I personally think that's a very compelling thing just off initially hearing it. Do you have any idea of how big the ask would be from the sovereign treasury? And what currency it would be paid out in?
In terms of our negotiation with the team itself, when we have been building our own team, so we promised them some kind of token allocation. So we would require some amount of SOV, as well as we would require some amount of USDT or some other stable coins so that we can do other kind of payments as well. So we will be presenting budget. So this is not again not a done deal. This is me being discussing the terms with you guys, and to know about the exact amount, it will require some time. But I can whip out something by tomorrow or so, and give you a brief detail about how much might be we be spending in the next 6 months or a 1 year period, and based on that, it will be the ask from the Sovryn team or the exchequer.
Great. I think it's a very intriguing proposal. Thanks.
Thanks,
It
David.
sounds also very good to me. Just to clarify in simple terms, so it means for now the software governance fully the OG until further notice, right?
So in this mechanism, like if we are going with the grant mechanism, there won't be an OG token at all, at least for the foreseeable future. And we will be going forward with the Sovryn token itself for almost all the use cases, including the vetting process and all that thing. And in terms of revenue sharing, as I said, a major portion will go to Sovryn community and a minor portion will go to the Origins treasury. We will be having our own treasury so that we can have a little autonomy. At the same time, we would be much more into the Sovryn community without any division in the capital value for the token, for the SOV token.
Sounds very good. Thank you for your comments.
Thank you. Any feedback on this idea? We haven't written up the exact details about it, but if you have any comments on that or any feedback on this, it would be really helpful.
I've got a thought that I'd just like to throw into the mix, and it's just food for thought basically at this point. But going off of what you said, where some of the funding would be brought over in SOV and stablecoin, the words I picked up on that kind of sit a little uneasy with me is that that it would be developed and it would be under SOV right now, but could possibly be another token down the road. So if that were to happen, I think it would be sensible if there were some sort of condition put into place that if that were to happen, that there would be some sort of a reimbursement, return of funds to the SOV treasury, perhaps with interest. It's just a thought, but it just seems to me as though what this would ultimately be doing is having the potential of kicking the can down the road of exactly where we're at right now. I could be wrong on this, and I apologize if I am, but I just wanted to get that out and air it out a little bit. If you wanted to maybe fill in the blanks on that a little bit, Shevin, that would be great.
Sure. Is that Scotty or someone else?
Oh, yes, it is. I'm sorry. This is Scotty G. Yes. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Scotty G, for the feedback. So regarding this, what I would like to say, I cannot predict the future, but what I would suggest doing is like this. If let's say that we in the coming future we decide that now Origins is really grown up and it's time to get to a token mechanism, this will again go to the SIP mechanism, and as you said, it might be the similar situation like right now we have. But the difference being that at that time it will be much more developed, much more mature in terms of technology, in terms of the number of launches we might have done at that time, and also in terms of all the aspects in terms of marketing. So these things will be really helpful at that time. And if let's say that we did a bonding curve at that time, this might not be an issue. If let's say that we did a fixed supply, what I would suggest is maybe, as you said, in terms of repaying the Sovryn exchequer, we could do it in terms of the token itself, like the amount we have received from the Sovryn exchequer, we can provide them in terms of token. Or there is another mechanism where we can just airdrop all the tokens for 1:1 for all the people. So there are multiple mechanisms by which we can fight it out, like how might be a better way. And again, we can do it as a community. Could you guys mute? Thank you. Okay, so where we can fight it out and see how moving forward would be a much better way in terms of if it is a fixed supply or a bonded token or an airdrop mechanism. So at that time, at that market condition, at that specific terms, we can decide how that might go. But right now, to define a specific method, that might be a bit difficult. I hope that answers your question, Scotty.
Yes, it does. As long as the thought is there, and that it's a discussion that would be would be on the table, and just something to always have in our minds is the potential down the road, and how there might have to be a mechanism in place to to transition in that direction. Thank you.
Yep. Thanks, Scotty. And again, I just want to make sure that when anyone, not just me, but anyone puts a draft in the forum, it's a possibility for all of us to go through it, get feedback, and give constructive criticism, rather than just making a decision right now, right then, that, oh, this is how they are doing it, that should not be done. So rather than doing that, let's come up as a community as a whole and make sure that we are providing them, or anyone who is coming up with the same for a constructive criticism, because as Yago said, we are trying to build an ecosystem in and around Sovryn, and if we as a community are much more welcoming, not just for these kind of SIPs, but any kind of SIP which might help Sovryn, that might be really helpful for the Sovryn ecosystem as well as a whole to move forward.
So this is Kay Kern. I've been I didn't like the idea of the separate coin. What you just said makes a lot of sense. Let's learn what we have, get some successes under our belt, and then decide if a coin makes sense. So I totally support this.
Thanks, Kay Kern.
All right, do we have any more questions for Sovryn?
Hello.
Yeah, go ahead.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
My name is Seko. Thank you very much for sharing your thoughts. So Shevin, thank you very much. It was great to hear from you. And I think I'm very supportive of the recent info that you gave. I would like to go back a bit to the bonding curves, and to me it's not really clear what the problem with the bonding curve is right now. What I found very interesting is in the forum when John Light described the bonding curve, there was a lot of confusion. But if you look at the recent zip from OG, there were a lot of people that were very supportive of bonding curves. So I think a lot of people understand the bonding curve, and a lot of people want the bonding curve. And I would just like to know where are the current problems with this, and yeah, what's the way forward with the bonding curve?
So in terms of bonding curve, let me be clear, this is my own opinion when it came to the SIP as well. So in terms of bonding curve, I think that right now the capitals which we are infusing into the bonding curve mainly for Origins, it's a really high amount, due to which we are not able to allocate much resources to the other part of the ecosystem of the Origins project. So in terms of that, why it was different in the case of Mint and why it was different in the case of Origins is that for Mint, if you remember that it was not based on a particular set of amount. Like for Mint, it was a it's not unlimited, but it was without a ceiling. We were raising it, and we were given a certain amount of time, 24 hours to do that raise, and we raised around 4 to 7 million, somewhere around that, and that was a part of that was considered for the reserve ratio, and the rest of it was stored with the Sovryn exchequer for the mint development. So that was a different case because of the fact that it was without a ceiling, or it was without any other metrics being related to the tokenomics. While when it came to the origins, we had certain tokenomics in place, and we had certain limits on these things. Like we thought to raise X amount of money for X amount of tokens. And the way we were doing it was really technically complex. Because we were going to use our own origins platform to raise the amount and then infuse the capital which we raised to the bonding curve, and then get the tokens for that, and then use that again to the fund, again back to fund the origins contract to provide it to the users who contributed. So even to say this out, it is a complex process, and based on that, the high capital requirement, even though we, let's say that by somehow we were able to raise that high amount, that was not really utilized in terms of the capitals being added. So if you look at the any AMM from Sovryn, the liquidity which is being provided is going to be helpful in terms of getting a liquidity reward from the Sovryn. But whereas if you provide like, it's not providing liquidity, it's actually either selling back the OG token or providing SOV to the bonding curve to mint new OG tokens. So the capital which are being sent into the bonding curve are not really used in a much more better way. And that was one of my reason why I think that bonding curve was not the better mechanism. In terms of the second point, which was mentioned, the market perception, and to be quite honest, if you look at the current market, people are already saying that this is going to be a bull market now, and this is going to start from now. I don't know if it is going to be a bull market or a bear market or bear market or anything. But at the same time, we have to consider as a launchpad. If we are not able to pull off our own launch through our launchpad, then we are not really doing something good, or we are not doing something the right way. And that was the another reason. In terms of UX, how Mint mitigated that problem is that we created an AMM pool. And if we are already providing a good amount of capital to the origins bonding curve, and then again adding more SOV and OG token pair to the AMM, that was not really going to help in terms of the trading, as well as in terms of having the bonding curve itself. If the bonding curve is not being used and it's just used as a final resort as an arbitrage. So that was another reason. And the UX in the bonding curve was not really good with the 3 transaction mechanism instead of 2. People are already not really good with these things. Sometimes people don't understand the gas limit and the gas price difference. Sometimes they don't know how to do these transactions. And for a first comer or a newbie to get into these possibilities, we are trying to reduce the friction point as much as possible. And introducing the bonding curve is actually just going to introduce more friction point for them. So these are my reason or my opinion about these things, and that's why we thought to move away from bonding curve, at least for the time being, and not pursue it in that way. So I hope that answers your question, Sakro.
Yes, thank you very much. It's great to hear.
Hey, this is Light. I commented, I replied to you about this in the forum, Shevin, but I'll mention it here as well since it's come up. I think the point you bring up about the UX of the bonding curve is not really a fair point, because for people who want a simplified experience, they can just trade using an AMM or on some other exchange that's more familiar to them. For example, how we already have a Mint RBTC pool. People don't have to use the bonding curve to trade Mint. They can just trade using the familiar Sovryn AMM UX. So I think that's a pretty weak point. But with regards to your point about the capital requirements. Yeah, you were that makes sense, and I think it's really your strongest argument for moving away from the bonding curve, at least for the Origins project.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Ryan, for the feedback. Yeah. Just to add to that point, like for some people, even complex transaction looks like a baby step for them. Like they can do it very easily. For some, it might not. But using an alternative sometimes might be a useful method. But let's say that there was an arbitrage opportunity in the bonding curve, but not in the AMM, including the AMM, sorry, not like that. So they are losing out on the opportunity because there was some sort of complexity for them at least. But for the other user, they might be able to use it out. And that's one of the reasons, that can be considered one of the reasons. But as I said, these are opinions about these things. And as I said, this is, I think UX is one issue. Might not be as major for some, but might be for some others.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, like, the issue of like arbitrage, it exists across all exchanges, and yeah, I mean, some or most really users are not in a position to take these arbitrage opportunities. I think that's just a fundamental reality of having exchanges or assets that are exchanged across multiple venues. That problem exists for SOV, BTC, pretty much every crypto asset that's traded in multiple venues. And there's, I don't think that's a problem that we necessarily need to see as a blocker or really a huge problem to solve. It's something that kind of solves itself due to the profit incentive that is created by these arbitrage opportunities, and the people who are motivated to take advantage of those opportunities will learn whatever skills they have to do so, and then everybody else can just trade however it is that they feel comfortable trading.
Mm-hmm.
So I would just like to point out as a point of order here, a point of clarity maybe, is it may also be the case, and I think that's part of what is emerging from this conversation, that certain types of protocols make sense as a SOV bonded token, whereas others it's more difficult to apply the SOV bonded token methodology to it. And I think one of the things that we should be thinking about is, there's more than just SOV bonded tokens, and there's more than one way to tie tokens or to bond tokens to SOV. And one of the, I think I previously said, I think of SOV bonded tokens as a scaling mechanism, not for chain throughput, but for governance throughput. The techniques and technologies around chain throughput have advanced and continue to advance. And so we are seeing, creative new ways of doing that. I suspect very much that SOV bonded tokens in the current form is maybe not the end of the journey in terms of governance scaling, but the beginning of it. And I think it's good that we've started this journey, because it's going to be increasingly important as time goes by.
Yeah, I think David's point about maybe waiting before turning a project into a sub-DAO with its own sub-token is, I think, a valid approach. It's in the sense that, you're able to really see, like, what are the governance demands of a project on the attention of SOV holders or stakers, and then if it starts to become overwhelming, then you spin it out. I think the one challenge, not the one, but one to think about with that approach is kind of like what we're going through with Origins right now, where SOV holders maybe get used to having the project in-house and are hesitant to let it go or kind of be seen as kind of letting it go. And the SOV bonded token model might alleviate some of those concerns because it keeps the SOV economic link intact, but it's still something to think about. But yeah, I do generally like this idea of kind of trying something internally, and then once the need for kind of scaling governance becomes apparent, then look at the different ways that you could do that. And SOV bonded tokens would be one way, but maybe there are other ways.
So I would argue just on that point that scaling governance is more than just scaling votes. And indeed, votes are just sort of like the most apparent, but in many ways, just the most surface or most base level of governance, right? Governance also includes the core team working on it. It includes making decisions on how the project is going to move forward on a day-to-day basis. It includes things like bringing in partnerships or investors. Governance maybe isn't even, from that perspective, the right term, but rather coordination, right? Which is sometimes the term that we use instead, because it is a little bit more inclusive of the, what it means to have a group of people being able to coordinate their efforts. So I think with Origins, in not all of those aspects, but in many of those aspects, we did feel, and I still feel, that we have reached a point where it does actually start to make sense to think about how we can be scaling this out. I think we're now an hour and a half in, and so what I suggest we try to do is begin to wrap it up. Perhaps before we do that, are there any other significant issues which we haven't discussed today that anyone would like to raise?
Yeah, thank you. This is Sekro again. It's another topic, but I would like to bring it up today. We don't have to discuss this, just maybe that you know about it. First, I think it's about yield farming, and I think the yield farming rewards are good as they are. Right now, I think it's 105,000 SUV tokens per week, so this would equal around 5 million SUV tokens over the course of 2022. So roughly 5% token inflation with regard to the total SUV supply. So I think that's fine. From a user's perspective, it's a bit annoying that we don't know to what extent the rewards are continuing. Yield farming involves risk, and it's best to do it over longer time frames. And so it would be great to have some knowledge about the liquidity mining rewards over a longer time frame than just a week. Yeah, would like to hear what's your thoughts on this.
I think that's a very good point. I'm interested. Are there other people who have thoughts on the liquidity mining? I know, for example, Martin, you had some thoughts.
Yeah, I think I agree with that point. Sorry, I had to miss almost the entire town hall because I had to pick up my kids. But yeah, so I agree with that point, and I would also. I don't see the sort of the benefits of having the rewards be locked up. I think I don't. Yeah, they make the rewards less attractive, and because you have to wait for them. So it's again, it makes them more it makes the whole endeavor more risky. but at the same time, it doesn't do so much to for example, like it just delays the increase in supply. And so I don't see, I agree with the previous points, and I would add to that it would be nice if these maybe wouldn't be locked up at all, and it would be just liquid like the staking rewards at the moment.
Yeah. So I think I discussed this with you briefly on the forum because I saw you had commented about that, and I thought it was an interesting point. I want to just use this as an example. So one of the things that I think it was you actually, Martin, asked is what are, for example, with origins, what more needs to be done, right? And I think that what we find is that there are tweaks, for example, tweaking the liquidity mining rewards. It's a small thing, right? We could change the way they're given out, so they're given out instantaneously instead of over a 10-month period, but that requires work, and it's actually surprising how much work making that kind of change securely and testing it and adding a full testing suite to it takes. And so it's just, I think, a good example of the kind of thing that very likely we want to consider doing, we want to prioritize, and why it's important that we focus on making the relatively few things that we choose to do really, really great and get them perfect. And that does take time. So going from 80% to 100%, that last 20% is 80% of the work. But I'm glad you guys brought up this topic. It's a topic that we can talk about separately if it warrants a longer conversation. And I think I'm curious, as we come to the end of this town hall, what topics you guys would be interested in discussing in future town halls. Are there things that that would be good topics, or that you would advise as topics for coming town halls?
Yeah, it's Tiam here. Of course, I think that's the big elephant in the house, adoption. And I'm not talking about price, but about anticipation. And to just wait and wait and wait and making plans and whatever, it's great, no problem. But I'm missing the, as Iago, you said it before, the Apple company. They're the absolute genius at building up anticipation for upcoming stuff. I mean, that phone isn't even built, and people are crying to get a hold of it. And that's the part I'm tremendously missing.
I think having a discussion around adoption and communication, that's a very, very important conversation, and it's one that the adoption team are looking forward to having, and to having a conversation around that, and several conversations around that, on an ongoing basis. I'll just say one thing. I think most everyone that I've spoken to agree with that. That is a skill that we as a community can develop and improve on. And I think part of this idea of having bundled releases that you can build anticipation towards is part of the thinking towards making exactly what you said happen, and giving ourselves the time to bundle not just technologies together, but the communications, the marketing, the hype and anticipation in advance of everything. So yeah, we'll definitely organize a town hall around that. Thank you.
Yeah, I agree with the adoption point to discuss, and I want to mention one thing for everyone listening. I like adoption is also a lot, like everyone has a Instagram account or a Twitter account, or there's a lot of the community can do also to help. So if something, sometimes I see something release or Twitter and just retweet it, send it to friends, whatever. If everyone of the community doing that, I think, yeah, but that also helps adoption and helps spread the word. So if everyone can maybe pick up that a little bit more and say it also to people you know, that could be great, I think.
Yeah. Before we adjourn, are there any other topics that you guys would like to see in future town halls? Especially in the near term?
There is one more point that I would like to see, maybe, or to discuss. What about Mint? So what are the next steps for Mint? Are there any medium terms for revenue, any medium term plans for revenue generation, like lending out sub-tokens like ZeroUSD or Dollar on Chain in order to earn yield, or are there any interactions with the Zero Stability Pool planned? Or will there be a fee to use the Mint protocol? Are there any other plans with Mint? Would be great to have a discussion on that.
Yeah, definitely. That can be organized, and I know that some of the developers have several ideas around potential revenue generating systems, and you know, the launch of Mint. So Mint's Nuestro are very, very advanced in terms of being effectively ready to launch. And part of the reason that they haven't launched is exactly this learning that now that we're in year one, we want to build up the anticipation, the excitement, the story around launching the first proper, Bitcoin-backed stablecoin with the zero loans and all of the implications and how you use it, right? I think there's a very big story here, which can drive a lot of excitement and growth in the near term, and so we want to launch that to the best of our ability. And so having a town hall around Mint, I think, and more generally around Bitcoin-backed stablecoins and the uses of them and how to build adoption around them, I think is a great idea. I'll just point out that in the upcoming in the upcoming community meeting on Thursday, a very important thing will be an initial presentation by the Exchequer around budget from the previous year and going forward. And there will be a town hall around that specifically, so that's an additional piece. And then I think that there's also been interest in having a town hall around core community values, as well as getting what someone earlier in the call suggested, how we can build better tools or better systems to make it easy for the community to start engaging and involving themselves more. So those are some of the other issues that are being considered. I'd like to bring the call to a close now, and I just want to say, I'm constantly impressed, and I hope you guys feel it as well. Like the level of engagement, conversation here, feedback, and initiative and ideas that come from the community, I think make Sovryn very, very special. And it's the kind of thing that is the backbone, right, that allows us to be building something with a long-term view, and at the same time building a community which is going to be able to support and grow it over time. So I'd like to thank everyone, all the Sovryns who joined. I think we are, we had an amazing year last year in terms of what we delivered. I think this year is going to be at least as amazing. And so I look forward to having more conversations with you guys like this. And thank you very much for your time and for joining. Stay Sovryn, everyone.